Great. So, Kira, let's go ahead and, yeah, thank you. Look at each other's smiling faces so I can officially welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you here to join us for our second training, where we will dive deeper into the five Alive tools and how program leaders can leverage them to support cell programming. These tools were originally co-developed with a group of expanded learning programs who were interested in developing better ways to assess social emotional learning in their programs. So with that being said, they developed two tools for that purpose, a staff survey that we refer to as the Five Alive Staff Survey, and a student cell assessment instrument, which we call the Five Alive Student Assessment. So from the original construction of those tools to the piloting of those tools, and here we are now finally sharing them with the wider community via the Toolkit website. Throughout that whole progress, these tools have really aimed to understand how students are receiving cell programming. And both of those tools would ideally work as part of your own cell programming or continuous improvement cycles. So we're going to discuss exactly what that looks like today, and hopefully you walk away with some implementation ideas specifically for your program. So with that very high level learning objective out there, let's turn to our agenda to get a better idea of what that's going to look like today. Great. So we're going to start off with an icebreaker brought to you by our friend Kira from the Social Policy team. After that, we'll discuss the survey tool. One of our goals for today is that everyone here can become familiar with the Cell 5 Alive Staff Survey. So during our December training, we focused more on the assessment. So we wanted to make sure that we at least touched on the survey here today as well. After we talk about the survey, we're going to spend the bulk of our time during this training discussing the implementation of the Five Alive tools. So it's during that portion that we're hoping you walk away with tips and strategies for administering the tools. And by the end of that segment, have a better sense of how the data will with those tools can inform your programming. And then finally, we're hoping that you stick with us until the closing and continue to engage with us because we're going to ask for your feedback. So we'll have a pretty short survey. We're going to talk about some other upcoming events, and that should take us to the conclusion. You can go on with your day from there. So it doesn't look like too much on the agenda, but I promise you as we go, it's gonna get deep fast. So there is a lot to cover. Again, hoping everyone can just stay engaged throughout that. But let's go ahead and kick this off since we do have a lot to cover. I'm going to turn it over to Kira now for our icebreaker.
Thanks, Nicolette. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. So today for our icebreaker, I was thinking it would be nice to just share either a self-care activity that you're planning to do for yourself this week, just to take care of yourself, or your favorite self-care activity. Maybe you've got a busy week coming up. And so we'll open up some breakout rooms for you to discuss, and I'm hoping people can get inspired and learn new ways to take care of themselves. So I'm going to open up those rooms for 5 minutes, and I can drop the question in the chat. And I hope you all have some good conversations.
This would be
Hi, Fatima. People are just in breakout rooms now for, sorry, I'm trying to turn my camera back on. People are just in breakout rooms now for a quick little icebreaker. I think they'll be coming back in about a minute, so they'll be back soon.
I guess you just had one. That sounds good. Good.
All right. Oh, wait, Kira, sorry, you probably had final words.
Welcome back, everybody. Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself there for a second. I hope those were some good conversations and that you were inspired by one another to do something for yourself this week. And I will pass it back over to Nicolette to get us started on talking about the Five Alive survey tool. Now you can have the floor, Nicolette.
Thanks, Kira. I was just so excited to share back my conversation that was like interrupting you. But anyways, getting back on track now. I do want to take some time for those of us that are less familiar with the Five Alive tools to talk about the Five Alive staff survey, since that's where we're going to be spending the next chunk of our time. So the gist of it is the Five Alive staff survey is a survey for instructors where they can share evidence of student cell development. They can gauge their own readiness to implement cell, and they can share any support they may need. Both the Five Alive student assessment and the Five Alive staff survey tie to the 5 competencies in the CASTLE framework and one focus skill within the competency. So regardless of what curriculum your program uses, or if you incorporate cell without using a formal curriculum, both of the tools, so like the staff survey and the assessments, can be implemented with a focus on a specific skill for development. So an example of that is instead of the survey or the assessment focusing on relationship skills, which is the competency, it'll focus on the specific skill, effective communication. So because we haven't done a deep dive into the survey part in the past, I do want to take some time now to discuss the tool a little bit more before we start thinking about what implementation will look like of that tool later. So can we go to the next slide? Thanks, Kira. I do want to start off with what is in this survey. So some of you, either through the homework assignment or helping us pilot, may already be familiar with the survey and its 4 main section. For those of you who are less familiar, feel free to peruse the survey as I quickly review the content. So Mika, can you go ahead and drop a link in the chat to that survey tool so people can have it available as we go through this slide? Thank you. So first off, you can see on the screen, we have the respondent background. In this section, this is asking classroom instructors just to identify like the school, the district site, whatever it is that they're responding from, how long they've been at that school or site, their role, recent activities they have led, how frequently they've led those activities. So all that kind of background information. I think this respondent background section is a really great example of where you can play around a little bit and how you tailor your survey. So if you wanted to know if they were like population, you could ask that here. Or any other kind of question that's more unique to your program. This is a great section that can be tailored. After that section, we'll have the student cell development. So in the student cell development section, you're providing evidence of student improvement in a given focus skill. So you can example of what that would look like on the right here. So as I said before, we're asking about focus skills, not the competency. So we're using the effective communication focus skill that's connected to the relationship skills competency. And it asks questions about how students have demonstrated that focus skill in the last 30 days. So these options here, which are check all that apply, tie directly to the assessment rubrics. So you do have some of that communication happening between the two tools in that way. Next, you go to the section on needed staff support, where staff will reflect on their access to the resources they need to support student cell development. This section has a series of Likert scale questions, like strongly agree, strongly disagree, as well as a couple open-ended responses. So you're able to learn more about what those resources are that staff need. The final section is staff implementation of cell. So here we're asking classroom instructors to indicate how often they provide various opportunities for students to develop focus skills. So again, we're having some like strongly agree, strongly disagree questions, as well as open-ended questions here as well. So like I said, very quick overview, but hopefully that does give you some ideas of what you'll find in the survey. And I do want to take it a step deeper on the next slide. All right, now we want to give you some time to sit with the survey and think about what it means for your program. If you haven't already, please open up the survey form from the link that Mika dropped in the chat a second ago. And you can go ahead and open that up, open up your training workbook if you haven't done that already. And if you go to page 1 of that workbook, you're going to see the homework assignment. So that homework assignment where we asked you to complete the survey and answer those questions are now on the slide for you. It's totally fine if you weren't able to get to that homework assignment. You could just work on it now in this little survey refresher activity we had. But please take a second, open up the training workbook, open up the staff survey link that was provided, and we're going to break you into small groups where you're going to discuss those items for 5 minutes. So we'll drop these questions into the chat. So Mika, if you could go ahead and drop those, please. Where in your small groups, we're asking that you answer those 3 bullet points, and then have you report back after those 5 minutes. So pretty straightforward activity. Any questions? All right, looks like not. Kira, can you send us to our breakout rooms for 5 minutes, please?
Yep, I'm just gonna make one quick little adjustment and then I will open those up.
All right, bye,
Safe
everyone.
travels. Okay. I asked that they put us in the same room. I asked us that they put us in the same room, so we're in room 1. Well, I'm in room 1. Are you in room 1?
Oh, you
I was
need-
just asking, am I supposed to go to a breakout room?
No, it's just because I can't exclude you guys from them since you're not hosts.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking at mine. I was gonna ask the same thing. Do we want to pause the recordings again this time, or are we gonna re-record this, you think?
Let's pause it.
All right, I see us coming back. Hello. How was that for everyone? Does anyone have anything they want to share from that discussion? Mara, too short. Oh no, it must have been a juicy conversation.
Well, I can just share that I think just to start things off, I think we need to remember that this particular form that is the staff survey that we're reviewing is really assuming that there is some base level knowledge of social emotional learning, that is something that you are interested in implementing as part of your program. So I think we need to lean into the assumption here with this training that everybody is doing some form of SEL. You may discover with this particular tool and getting the feedback from your staff that there might be the need for additional training on specific curriculum, for example, or figuring out ways that you can be more intentional with some things that you're already implementing. So that was part of our conversation, just as by way of share out. But generally, in terms of our cursory review, we like the questions. There's one wondering and pondering, is it too long? So I'll just leave it at that and let others speak.
The survey, is it too long? I don't think it's too long. It seems pretty quick.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think and we'll talk about this more in the considerations too. In terms of the link, definitely want to encourage folks to tailor it for what feels appropriate for your program. You might even take certain questions and add them to a general survey you're already doing. So if you really want to make it like shorter or like decrease the amount of times that people are surveying at your particular program. But yeah, anything else come up for folks? All right. That's okay. We're going to have a lot more discussion later. So with that being said, I do want to pause for a second before I talk more about those considerations I've already hinted at, because when you all left, I realized I never actually introduced myself. I just started talking because I was so excited to introduce you guys to like the Cell Toolkit website and all that. So I want to just pause really quickly and say hello, good morning. Glad to have you here. My name is Nicolette, and I am an associate at Social Policy Research Associates. We've been partnering with the San Jose Public Library Foundation on their internal learning of these different tools. It's not just about with that partnership, it's been with San Jose Learns, their grants. Cell's just a part of one of the many projects we've worked on with them. But this particular Cell project we've worked on for at least the last 3 years. So really excited to like be sharing these resources today. I'm also joined by Mika Clark, if you want to wave Mika, who is our project director for this. And she's been on the same journey. She's been involved with the foundation even longer than I had. So I look at her as more of the expert on like life. But also we have Kira here. You give a wave. Kira is also an associate at Social Policy Research Associates, who's been on the project for a number of years, also helping with the cell work as well. So that's the SPR team. I do want to pause and shout out the San Jose Public Library Foundation team that's on the call. If you guys want to just wave real quick. And they've been helping, like this is like their work essentially. So want to acknowledge that they're in the room with us today. And then Mara, do you want to say a few words? Mara's been a partner since like the jump on this. So I'll let Mara introduce herself.
Oh, no real need, but hello, everyone. My name is Mara Wold. I'm with the Monterey County Office of Education and lead for Region 5 Expanded Learning Partnerships. Myself and my colleague, who also is on the call here today, Letty Gomez Gong, the two of us support 600 sites in 4 counties. So we're providing technical assistance to all of the publicly funded before, after school, and summer programs in Santa Clara County, as well as Monterey, San Benito, and Santa Cruz. So it's just a privilege and honor to have everybody be a part of this SEL work. I know myself and a colleague who is no longer with the Campbell Union School District, but Edgar Romero were two who co-founded, I guess, this group and helped facilitate a lot of conversation around what are some of the key SEL skills that we want to build in our young people in the out of school time space. And so this work has been over the course of, I would say, 3 years at least, probably more, just to go through so much of data and conversations and looking at really the why behind our programs and what we really want to build in our young people to ensure that they really are set up well for college, career, and life. And that's really our vision in expanded learning. So thanks so much for the opportunity just to be here and for all of your work, Nicolette, Mika, Kira, the whole SBR team, and of course the Library Foundation too for helping to spearhead this work. It's really important, and it's exciting to see it come to this stage.
Thank you, Mara. And lastly, the San Jose Public Library, not to be confused with the Library Foundation. So hello, Jeanette, Stephanie, and I think I saw Lizzie here. Want to give them a shout out as well. I don't know if one of you wants to come off and like formally introduce yourself and the library.
Introduce ourselves. So, hi everybody. I lost myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yes, so I'll introduce. So we're the Library Foundation. Sorry, I'm the library in the part of the San Jose City, but we also work together with the foundation that supports, and we work together in the programs. And part of it, and many of you may be some of our grantees, is we have the SJ Learns grants and Tutoring Matters, where we focus on supporting our students through expanded learning programs, either after school programs or high dosage tutoring. And we also come together with Mara and work with SBR to collaborate with all of you and learn from you and make sure that all the information we're providing to you in events, it's helpful, but I guess we're also not overwhelming you. So we also like to hear your feedback about the survey, the information we're providing to you, because I think at the end of the day, you're all the experts and we want to make sure this works for all of you. So, and in my team, it's Lizzie, which is our senior librarian, and also myself, Stephanie, which I'm the literacy program specialist. And then from the foundation, we have Jeanette. So it's for the team. Thank you so much for this little time.
Thanks, Stephanie. You said it way better than I could have said it, so appreciate you. With that being said, let's just imagine that that was part of our initial welcome and that this has just been like a smooth transition so far. So getting us back to the staff survey, I do want us to move on to the considerations now, since we've already started talking about them. We just heard what the survey might look like a little bit at your program. For instance, maybe combining that with an existing survey. Maybe you've had other conversations when you're in your breakout rooms, but I do want to go ahead and present a few other considerations that the SPR team thought of as well. So the first one is Google Forms can be used to automatically help you with the analysis process. So in other words, programs don't need to spend time creating graphs or tables themselves. Google's going to do that for you. So in other words, or in the words of Bruno Mars, don't believe me, just watch as I screen share what that looks like when any Bruno Mars fans, can you do like a little like reaction in Zoom? Just me. Okay. Okay, I saw some. Awesome. I'm going to screen share what that looks like when you go into Google Forms. And usually I play like some like transition music in my head whenever I'm doing any kind of like screen share, just so it's not like we're awkwardly like looking at each other. So yep, that's the music coming out right now. Let's see if I can find. that. Do one of you have the link to the survey? Okay, here, found it. Do, do, do. Ba, ba, ba. Here we go. Is everyone ever able to see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. So when you go onto the Cell Toolkit website, there's an option to download the 5 Alive staff survey, and you will get sent to something that looks like this, where you have like the ability to edit the survey. So right now, this is how the survey looks, but you can still like change like the text if you wanted to like add in a new section. You can do that through the link that's provided on the Cell website. This is the link that I sent to all of you for the homework. So if you click on responses at the top here, I can see 9 folks completed it. I can scroll down and see the summary. So I have an idea of how everyone answered those questions. And Google's already generated some pie charts for me. So I don't have to worry about that if I wanted to share this information back with my own teams. I also have access to the raw data here, so I can see the different responses that were written. Again, we have more tables or pie charts. We can look at it like by question. We can look at individual responses, and you can scroll through that. For instance, maybe you had someone who said strongly disagree across the board, and you just want to like check that it was the same person. Looking at those individual responses is helpful. If you wanted to have access to all of the data, maybe you like to make your own charts in Excel, you can come up here and click on the view in sheets. And it's going to create an Excel version of the data for you. And we'll talk more about how you can make your own bar charts based off of this data at a later time. But I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that Google does help you in the analysis of that information. So I will stop my screen share. And Kira, can I turn it back to you to screen share that PowerPoint slide, please? Great, thank you so much. So our next consideration here, we want to encourage programs to tailor the staff survey. So that's why I've been saying it so many times already, but want to make sure it's attending to your specific needs. So helping in that, we've provided a question bank in the appendix of the user guide. So if you did download that user guide earlier, you can scroll to like the very bottom and you'll see that there is a question bank there. And by using that question bank, you can pull from our list of suggested survey additions, and that's going to make it a little bit easier for you to add items to the staff survey when you download it from the website. Another consideration, all program staff can reflect on the survey data and participate in discussion around cell development. So this is just something tying back to kind of the purpose of us being here today. We want you to be able to use this tool and implement it at your own site. And part of that is making sure that as you're like using this data and like using these tools, that you're sharing back with your staff to help with those program improvement cycles that you have and that continuous improvement. So just want to encourage folks to, like share the data with your staff, have conversations, get a little bit more context to why people are answering the way they are. But we're also going to talk about that in more detail later. And lastly, there are different points in time of when it may be helpful to administer the survey. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Maybe you have a general survey that you want to pull some questions for and add it to that survey. You could also want to use this survey to help you onboard new staff. Try to get a sense of like where they are as they're joining your programs. So maybe it's better to have this at the beginning of the year when you're onboarding new staff. Perhaps you could think about administering this multiple times during the school year. So there's a lot of different scenarios where you might consider the best time to administer, but only your program is going to be able to answer those questions. So that concludes our overview of the 5 Alive staff survey. I'm going to pass it on to Mika now to talk more about the assessment and implementation.
Thanks, Nicolette. Thanks for all that information about the staff survey. So I'm going to be focusing now on the student assessment. So hopefully you are all at our first 5 Alive training when we talked a lot about what is in the student assessment and how to administer the assessment with students. Because today we're going to talk a little bit more about how to prepare on the back end. So how you all as program leaders can support your staff and use the assessment to strengthen your program. So we're going to start with a really quick reminder about what the tool is, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail about how program leaders can support the use of the tool. So the 5 Alive student assessment is an assessment that a student completes to help them reflect on their own understanding of cell concepts and skill development. So it's divided into 5 mini assessments, each of which is focused on a specific social emotional skill that was pulled from the Castle social emotional learning framework. So we're going to walk through one of those assessments that's focused on effective communication to jog your memory. All right, so the assessment starts with a quick multiple choice question based on a short scenario that a student would probably be familiar with. And then there are some options about how students can respond. So this is a bit of a warm up to get students thinking about the competency and the focus skill. Then students have a chance to draw or write about up to 3 times that they themselves demonstrated the focus skill. So you can see here we have a real drawing from a student who helped us pilot the assessment. And then finally, the instructor that's administering the assessment to the student will take some time to ask some reflection questions. So this can be done individually with a student or also in small groups. So this is a way to really get to the meat of what students are thinking when they're considering these focus skills. Right, and then after students complete the assessment, instructors can use this rubric. There's a different rubric for each of the 5 Castle skills. And they use the rubric to determine where they fall along the continuum of developing these skills. So you can see here we've got from early, understanding, development, and then to mature. So just as a reminder from our training from last time, when instructors are scoring students, they should choose a whole number, and students will get just 1 overall score for each social emotional skill. So it's not a score for each row in this rubric. So you wouldn't be giving them a score for the listening row and then a score for the speaking row. It's just 1 cumulative score that represents their holistic understanding and development. And then after completing the assessment and going through the scoring process, staff and instructors will enter their results into this student assessment data form, which is available on Google. Of course, if there's another way you want to record the results, that's totally fine, but this is just a tool for you to use. It's a handy way to collect the data across several instructors. So after this is filled out, then you can export the data to this data form. So as you can see here, this has, oops, sorry. This has like the student identifiers, their score, and then it also has some of the information that staff put down, like their justification for why the student got that score, some specific strengths that the student demonstrated, some areas of growth, and the instructor's thoughts about how the program can best support that individual student based on what they heard in the assessment. Okay, so that's our just very quick overview of the assessment. Just want to pause here and see if there are any questions. And then also a reminder that we go into a lot more detail about this in the user guide. And then there's also a recording from the part 1 of our training that you can also refer to. And I believe it's on the Public Library Foundation webpage that has the list of sources. Just going to sit for a moment just to make sure there are no questions. All right, fabulous. I think we can move on then. Okay, so in the part 1 of our training, we also discussed the general steps of administering the assessment, which you'll see displayed here on this slide. Today, we're going to go into a lot more detail about the preparation stage and the analysis stage. So first, you're going to prepare. You think about why you want to use the assessment, figure out logistics, and you train and prepare your staff. Again, we'll talk about this in more detail in a minute. Then comes the assessment stage, because we went into a lot of detail about this stage in the part 1 of our training. We're not going to cover that much here. And then finally, there's the analysis stage. This is where you get to take a look at the results to get some more insight into your students and how you can further develop your program. So this process is probably pretty familiar to all of you who regularly engage in a continuous quality improvement process. All right, and so now we're going to dive into the preparation stage. Okay, just at a high level, the primary 3 steps at this stage are to identify the purpose of the assessment for your program, because it can be used in a lot of different ways. Then you start figuring out the logistical pieces. So how can this be smoothly integrated into everything that you already have going on with your program? And then finally, you train and prepare your staff. Okay. So first, as a program, your team should determine how this tool will be integrated into your after-school programming. So spend some time really thinking critically about what you hope to get out of the tool. Is it a chance for students to reflect on their own growth, or a chance for individual staff members to assess how well their students are understanding the concepts? You could also use the results to assess the curricula, lessons, or approaches that you have used to support cell development. So there are a lot of different ways the assessment can be used, and then the answer to these questions can also help you figure out some of your logistical pieces, such as the timing when you want to administer the assessment. It's also important to think about how this assessment could potentially become a part of your formal CQI process. So how would something like this align with or complement what you're already doing to investigate the effectiveness of your program? Okay, so that's a lot of information, but now we're going to spend some time in breakout rooms thinking through how you might use the assessment. So Nicolette is going to add some discussion prompts to the chat, and then we'll send you off into your breakout rooms for about 5 minutes to discuss. Don't worry, I won't let people sit in silence forever, just giving a little time to see if anyone's brave enough to volunteer. I see in the chat that there is some curriculum recommendations being shared, so that's great. All right, well, like I said, I'm not gonna make us sit here in silence forever, so I'm now gonna pass it to Kira, who's gonna walk through step 2.
Thanks, Mika. So as Mika mentioned, the second step of preparation is to determine the logistics for administering the 5 Alive student assessment. So some of these logistics might include if the assessment will be administered to students individually or in groups, identifying the staff member who will administer the assessment to students, as well as any additional staff that might be needed as support or to cover the other students while the assessment is taking place, and also determining the timing of the assessment. And we have in the user guide, the Appendix A logistics worksheet can help with this. So this worksheet, which is located, as I said, in Appendix A of the user guide, which you can now find on the San Jose Public Library Foundation's website, as Nicolette mentioned earlier and linked earlier in this chat. This worksheet includes questions to help with logistics considerations, as well as place to keep track of assessments in the process of being scheduled and those that have been completed, and keeping track of entering that data form and all of those little nitty-gritty things. And here is that logistics form, if with a worksheet that you can see in the user guide. That top part is asking those questions that can help you stay on track. And then this bottom part here is for some participant tracking. And the last step of the preparation phase is preparing staff to administer the assessment. And this includes holding a training, which could be similar to what we did in the part 1 trainings, which you can also find a recording to on the San Jose Public Library Foundation's website. And thank you, Nicolette, for, thank you, Nicolette, for linking the user guide. But yes, so you can find this link also on that website over there. And it's also important to make sure that administering staff have adequate time to prepare for the assessment, and to review the user guide and the components of the tool. So with that and all of the information that we've given to you in the last almost hour, we're going to take a quick break before moving forward. So we'll take 10 minutes now, and you can come back at 11:06.
Thanks, Kira.
Feel free to turn off your cameras and step away. We'll be here at 11:06.
Welcome back, everyone. And as mentioned before, we're not going to be going over the assessment phase, so we will dive right into the analysis phase. So we're going to turn to what we as researchers think of as the fun part, analyzing your data and thinking through how it can inform your programming. This involves 4 primary steps: preparing your data, identifying questions to guide conversations, holding conversations with staff, and plans for next steps. So let's set the stage. Your team has administered the assessment and the results are in. You download the data from the student data assessment form on Google Docs, and it looks something like this. You might feel overwhelmed by all the scores and the thoughtful reflections from the student assessment data. What do you do with this? How can we prepare all of this data for staff to make sense of it? Now, do you remember that first step in the preparation stage? That was identifying the purpose of your assessment. Think back to your agreed upon purpose. This may help you think through what you want to do with this data. There are a number of factors that you may want to consider. First would be what sort of visuals will help you make sense of this data. You'll want to think through how to visualize the scores, which can be depicted by any type of graph that you can make with numbers, but also how you can present the other information from the data form, like student strengths and areas for growth, things that were written out in text. We'll talk about different ways that you can visualize both of these types of data and information later. Also, you want to think through what other kind of data you might want to incorporate. For example, perhaps you already put together student profiles with data from many different sources, and you use those to guide these conversations about how to best serve individual students. You can add this information to those student profiles as well. And lastly, should the data be organized by site, grade, or any other characteristic? Perhaps in step 1 of the preparation stage, Your team discussed wanting to know if English language learners were able to effectively engage in your SEL lessons, and you want to focus on them. Then you can incorporate that in this as well. So before we move on, I want to pause and see if there are any questions.
Okay, I have a question. I'll just throw it out there. So in thinking about the way your program already uses data or already discusses student needs, are there any considerations that you generally have when you're thinking of, when you're preparing data or thinking about how to look back on any information that you have about your students? Anything that you consider?
So in my program, we basically have two separate, kind of like two masters. One is we're running a program for the school district, Cupertino Union School District, and the other one is for the YMCA. And so like a lot of times I have to separate the program participants and look at different things.
Yes, that's a very good point. Yes, there's a lot of different ways you might want to kind of like disaggregate your students. And if that's the case, then it can be helpful in your student data form to make sure that you have a field for whatever other designation you may have for your students.
So Mika, can I just share that I know some of the elements that the state California Department of Education cares about, especially when we're using public funds to support our out-of-school time programs, is making sure that we're serving eligible student populations. So I think some of the other considerations that folks might be recognizing are your students English language learners? I think you mentioned that. Are they students who are homeless or foster youth? Are they students who are eligible for free reduced price meal? So those are what we call unduplicated populations. And those, a lot of our funders are very much care about, whether it's a public source of dollars being used or even a private one like San Jose Learns or Shortino or any of our other public foundations. The other one that's coming up a lot too is, are we serving students with special needs? So that's another population that I also think we might want to consider tracking.
Yes, definitely. And Mara, that actually also brings up a good point about like data privacy. So if you do have any sensitive information that you want to include, making sure that you're using some kind of student identifier, not a student name, would be an important thing to consider. All right, I think we can move on to the next slide. All right, so we want to share some examples of how you can present the student scores to help you make meaning of the data. So as you can see here, we have some fictitious student scores that we've arranged on this number line. So you see that big black line, so that's the average of these 10 student scores. And we just arranged them like above and below the average depending on the student score. And we color coded the little, like, arranged like little sticky notes. And we color coded the sticky notes to make it easier to see their score. So it could be fruitful to do something like this if you have like a limited number of students. Staff can take a look and consider if there's anything surprising or if the results align with what they would expect based on what they already know about the students. You could also color code the results by other characteristics, so it doesn't have to be by score because it's already kind of sorted by score. So you could color code them by site, by grade, by a special need designation, anything like that. So I'm also going to demonstrate some other visualizations that you can do straight in Google Docs. So bear with me a second. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm not as nimble as Kira is when it comes to this.
I was about to say, I was like, don't use my name because we know I am not nimble at the screen share. That's why I have the background music.
Okay, can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, so this is an example of a fictitious school called SPR. And so a couple things we could do. So first off, we can just make a simple chart. So just kind of click right here where it says insert. And again, if people are familiar with Excel, it might be easier to import this into Excel and do it if that's something you're used to, but you can also do it in Google Docs. So just go to insert chart. And then we've got this pie chart that shows the percent of students by grade. This might not be like that useful for you, but we can change it to look at student scores instead. So what we might want to do, sorry, 1 second. There we go. We're going to change it to a bar chart. So this shows that we have, for example, 10 third graders and 4 fourth graders, but I want to know about their scores. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the student score, this column I, as a series to the chart. So I click add series, and I just click on column I that has the student scores. Say okay. And then let's say we wanted to know, so like among third graders, what was their average score? We're going to change this right here next to the series from count to average. And then we have the average score by grade. And there you can also add the label. I think if you go to customize, go to series, you can add a data label. So that's one thing we can do. Let's say you want to more easily see how many third graders scored a 2 versus a 4. We can also create a pivot table. So if you go to insert and go to pivot table, now we're just going to create a nice simple little table. So we want to have grade as the rows. So we're going to move student grade right here on the side. This shows right here on the right, it shows all of the different fields from the charts or from the table. So we're going to move student grade to the rows. And then we're going to take student score and put them in columns. And now we want to actually fill in the table. So we'll take student grade again and we'll put it to the values. And now it counts, for example, the number of third graders who scored a 2, the number of fourth graders who scored a 3, and so on. We can also visualize this pretty easily in Google Charts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of copy this little table and move it down here. I'm going to change these headers to say score 2 to make it clearer. Score 3, score 4. And then you have to put a 0 into any missing cells, I think, to make Google Charts understand it. All right, and then you've got this little table. We're going to highlight it. And we're going to make a chart again. So we go to insert, chart. And then you can have a chart that looks a little bit like this. That shows, again, the number of 6th graders, for example, who scored a 3, number of 6th graders who scored a 4. One way that I find a little bit easier to look at something like this is to change it to this stacked bar chart. So you can just a lot more easily compare the distribution of scores by grade. So we could just more easily see, like, got a lot of 3s and 4s among these 6th graders, and probably you might expect that 3rd graders being younger, they would have more scores in the developing range than 6th graders would. You can also, if you go to customize and go to series again, you can add the data labels. So you can look a lot more easily at the counts. So there's a lot of different things you can do. We just wanted to give a little snapshot. Again, some of you might be very data savvy and do things like this in your sleep. But for those of us who don't on a regular basis, just wanted to give some examples of some of the things that you can do. Are there any questions before we move on to talking about what you can do with some of the text data that you get?
I would be curious, just, and maybe we don't talk about it now, maybe we talk about it at the end after we go through the text, but is really thinking about what does this data tell us about our own CQI process, and maybe either A, in telling the story of our success, or B, what does it tell us about what we might need to modify? So that's just a question I throw out there
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
universe.
Yeah, those will be important things to talk about with your staff when you hold the data conversations, when you kind of sit with this and try to figure out like, well, what does this mean for us? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And then Kira, can you put this, the slides back up and move on to the, yeah, perfect. All right. Okay, so that's a little bit about what we can do with the scores. Again, there's a lot more you can do. We just kind of wanted to give you a taste. But I want to spend some time thinking through those open-ended responses. So again, when staff are talking about like what the strengths are of their students, what their areas of growth are, and kind of what their ideas for how the program can best support the students. So those were some of the information that staff will be adding to that data form. So you might be especially overwhelmed by all of this information. It could be incredibly interesting and rich, but it's hard to figure out how you're going to have time during your data discussion to read through it all. So for example, you could consider pulling a sample of quotes from the strengths, areas of improvement, and needs buckets that you want to present. Or you may also consider pulling up themes within each category. A lot of different things you can do, but we're going to do a little activity to kind of just play around with it a little bit. So we're going to do a little activity in Mural, which is similar to Jamboard if you haven't used it before. So Nicolette, can you go ahead and drop a link to the Mural into the chat?
Can everyone see it in the chat?
Yes.
Great. If everyone can just go into that Mural page. Can I get a thumbs up from folks when people are have successfully entered? Oh, and you can just enter as a visitor when you're coming in. Cool. Nicolette is going to screen share the Mural as well. All right, thank you. Okay. So we're going to pretend that we're all staff from the fictitious SPR Academy, whose data we were just looking at in Google Docs. So we just finished the assessment process, and now we're getting together to look at 3 questions from the data form: the strengths, areas of growth, and additional support needed. So we have the responses to those questions already on little virtual sticky notes, which you'll see on the side in yellow, green, and blue. So we're going to go into breakout rooms where you'll read through the data on the sticky notes related, first starting with the strengths and the challenges, and you'll group them into the categories that we kind of already did on our own that are already here. For convenience, we went ahead and created these categories that connect to the relationship skills rubric. But if you think that something belongs in a totally new category, by all means, you can create one. So you'll have about 10 minutes to complete the activity of sorting the sticky notes and talking about it in your group. And then if you're done before the 10 minutes are up, feel free to go through the same process with the other sticky notes, which colors are, with the blue sticky notes, which are the areas of program support. So before we break off into our breakout rooms, are there questions? I see there's one in here. What are the numbered themes? Oh, I think that is where you can edit it and add your own theme if you think that there's another one that should be added. So just kind of placeholders for now.
I'm sorry, so we're all working on the same mural?
In your breakout rooms.
Okay.
You'll be working. Are there multiple sticky notes for each one?
I think there's just one for each one because I moved that one to verbal
Oh, yeah,
nonverbal
okay, there's
cues and
supposed
there's
to
none
be
left.
multiple.
Yeah.
Oh, can we just copy the mural?
Maybe we could do it out as a large group even. If there's only one.
Yeah.
Copy.
Here, I'm looking at you. Would it be easy to copy the mural? Or would it be easier to do it as a large group?
I can duplicate it right now. Pretty
I think
quick.
it might be easier if we just duplicate. I think it's pretty simple.
Yep, let me.
And then we can just go into the breakout rooms and give each group their own link.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that.
Okay. I have the separate links.
Okay. Okay, so the plan is you'll go out to your breakout rooms. When you're there, we're gonna pop in and give you a different link so that everyone has their own. Any other questions before we send you all out? Okay. All right, we'll see you in a little bit.
Okay. What rooms are you both assigned to?
Oh, I think I was assigned to 2.
Maybe.
Oh yeah, because we can't just like go pop into rooms, huh?
Mm-mm.
We're not hosts.
So each is numbered. Each of the links is numbered with a group number.
Can we just
And
broadcast to everyone like group 1?
I don't
This.
know if you can click links on broadcasts,
Oh, okay.
unfortunately.
Okay. So should the first one you send is just group 1, the second is group 2, the second is group, the third is group 3?
Yes, we can do it that way. I actually don't know if I sent them in that order, but
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll take the top one,
Which group are you?
group 1.
Group 1? Okay, I'll take the second one and bring it to group 2.
okay, then I can share the third one. Okay. I remember.
What was great about that is
Welcome back.
everyone's competitive nature got into play and like, we gotta finish now.
Oh, I
Well, we
love
were
that.
actually we were discussing whether or not we have time to give you all more time since, you know, we didn't have the mural links ready right away. So we lost a couple minutes there. So yeah, we were just trying to figure out if there's enough time. Do people feel like they want more time in their groups?
Yes.
Maybe, but I don't want to be the only one to say.
I saw some nods. Do people
I
kind
heard
of give
a
a thumbs
yes.
up if you're in agreement
Maybe, yeah.
that you'd like a little bit more time?
Yeah, we were just kind of getting into it, honestly. And then yeah. So,
Okay. Yeah, let's do more time.
Do we feel like 4 minutes is enough, or? I saw a thumbs up. So Kara, can you send us back for 4 minutes?
We
Yeah.
were, I just need to share that we were just rushing to hold on to a sticky because there were so many people in there. They were like, hurry, go grab it so we can make a connection.
hilarious.
So it was quite entertaining to feel like a challenge.
That gave it a little more spice than we meant, but that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you again in a few minutes. All right, I think we've got everybody now. Welcome back. So we wanted to share that as an example of something that you can do with your staff to look through the data. Obviously, it doesn't have to be on something like Mural. You can just do it on real life sticky notes in person. We thought this was a good way to show something that you could do either virtually or in person. So wanted to see if people had any reactions about that activity or any takeaways that they wanted to share.
I love how doing this activity made everything feel so much more tangible, and real, I guess.
It definitely would foster a lot of discussion because I could tell that there were already like disagreements between people like, oh, should we put it there? Should we put it there? In a good way, you know.
Different perspectives. I'm curious if anyone has done anything similar to this in their programs before. All right, well, so now in our little scenario, we have looked through some of our data. This is something you could do with staff, or you could do it before. When you are having conversations with staff, we also think it's important to prepare questions in advance. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So before you meet with staff to discuss results, you want to identify like some of the questions that you want to use to encourage staff to engage in the data. So we've compiled some questions and related resources that you can use in the user guide, but we also encourage people to always come up with their own questions. They know their students best, they know their staff best, they know their programs best, obviously. So right now, we're hoping you all could actually look at the user guide. If we can put that in the chat one more time, the link to the user guide. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, the training workbook, not the user guide. The link to the training workbook, on the second page, there is a section that says how to lead survey data discussions. We're hoping folks could just take a couple minutes to quickly read the excerpt from that, and then just give us a thumbs up when you're done. People are down, they can just give like a little thumbs up. Okay, I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. Great. All right, so we can move on. So we want to spend some time brainstorming some questions that you could pose to your staff when you're having any kind of conversation related to these results. Because all of the steps that we've gone through before are focused on the student assessment, we're actually going to shift gears a little bit, and now we're going to do this step in relation to the staff survey. So all these steps are kind of similar between working with the staff survey and the student assessment. We were just focusing on the student assessment before. So we're now going to look at the staff survey. So Nicolette, can you drop the mural link into the chat? Hopefully now everyone feels comfortable with murals because we're going to be using it one more time. This time we're not doing it in breakout rooms. We are just doing it in the full group. We can join that one. And then here, if you can, or Nicolette, if you can screen share. All right, so, and this is pretty straightforward. So using the link that Nicolette just shared, you can just write down some potential questions that you would consider posing to your staff if you were going to have a meeting about making a meeting after administering the staff survey. So to help come up with questions, you can consider the excerpt you just read and think of questions that avoid judgment and that also acknowledge missing voices. So we are doing this as a large group. So feel free to take a look at some of the other questions that others are adding and sharing. You can write them down in your training workbook if it's something that you think would be good to consider for yourself in the future. And we'll have about 5 minutes for this. Questions here for general, like what do you see when you look at this data? Question related to the staff survey could be, what does this data suggest about the support needed by staff? Or what does this data tell us about additional support staff might need? What training, coaching for quality or curricula? I think this one's really important here. Do you feel as a staff that this data accurately reflects your experience in the program? So again, a way to make sure that we're getting everyone's voice in there. Then for questions related to the 5 Alive assessment, which strengths do you identify in students? Does this data reflect all of your students, including students with special needs? What improvements could we make to ensure CEL is more engaging and relevant for students? What does the data tell us about changes, additions that we need to make to our own program? I like this question too. What do you not see when you look at this data? That could lead to some interesting conversations. And it also, I think, acknowledges that not everything is going to be shown through these assessments and through the survey. How can we ensure cell programming is accessible and beneficial for all students? What data points do we want to focus on and prioritize right now versus what we would need to come back to?
I don't want to ruin the momentum, but I do want to acknowledge the time. So do you think maybe another minute here, Mika?
One more minute, yeah. All right, does anyone want to shout out any questions that they see that really resonate with them?
I see someone put in the assessment, what improvements could we make to ensure SEL is more engaging and relevant for students? That's a very good question because sometimes we don't think about that. But if it's not engaging to them, they're not gonna gain anything.
All right, I think we can wrap up here. I know people are still writing down their last thoughts, which is wonderful, but we do want to make sure that we have time to wrap up. I think we can move on to our next slide then. We'll talk through just a little bit about some things to consider when you're having these conversations with staff. So first, there we go. So first, you want to think about who should be in the room. So does it make sense to include new staff? Would making the meeting hybrid or remote help all of the right players participate? Second, you might want to consider setting some norms at the start of the meeting. So you want to, of course, make sure that you're encouraging staff to honor the lived experiences of the students and of each other. And also just acknowledge that people can have different opinions and perspectives, which we talked about a little bit just a couple minutes ago. And then ultimately, this also goes back to some of these questions, like this data doesn't tell the whole story. So sometimes it's a reminder that it's okay to not have a solution. And then also remembering that we can be bringing in other data too, right? This information doesn't live in a vacuum. It's just like one little piece of the puzzle. And then finally, it may be important to figure out how to record and share the learning gained from the discussion. So it could be a good idea to identify a note taker ahead of time. And recordings might also be nice if that's an option. And then just make sure that you're able to share out with any staff that weren't able to participate. And I'm sure, of course, that many of you have engaged in these conversations before. I know you probably all have very developed continuous quality improvement processes. So I'm wondering if anyone else has any other considerations that you generally keep in mind that you wouldn't mind sharing with the group.
I really love question number 2 because I think that's really important in terms of setting norms and facilitating a productive discussion, which really won't happen in an honest, authentic way unless a safe environment is created for staff to be able to really share what's their successes, yes, but most importantly, where things have not gone well, because that's really where the learning and growth happens too. So how do we really generate that sort of vulnerable space where we feel safe sharing what's worked and what hasn't worked? because that's going to be ultimately the key to the success here in really looking at the data in terms of our own practice and how we improve upon it. So, and I love how this group has always done that. You know, Nicolette, I'm just going to pick on you because you're so good, and Kira too. You know, you guys have, we've entered into this space getting to know each other, and that's been the success of this ad hoc committee and been success of these trainings, is that we come in because we've invested a little bit of time in that relationship building and as staff. And so I think we feel comfortable being able to share. But if you don't have that going into this, it's going to, I think, set a totally different tone, and we may not be getting the results that we ultimately want.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like with the students, right? You need to first make sure that you have that foundation of safety before any learning can happen.
I also wanted to add to that. We talk about it during our trainings, the difference and the mind shift of focusing on program design and reflection versus staff performance, right? Many of the time staff is very fearful of sharing because they think it's going to be tied to their performance. Whereas when we set it up and frame it as we're coming in with the lenses of a program design review and reflection for authentic conversation and feedback, then we start getting into that openness of conversation. We like to use a good, better, how, what's working good. So in this case, what's looking good, what can be better, and then the how. And people tend to not feel as threatened to share out because they're focused in the lens of data and feedback.
I love that good, better, how. I haven't heard that one before. That's a good framing. All right, I see we only have 1 more minute left. So just very quickly breeze through our next slide. Thanks so much for hanging in with us. At this point, this is where you will be planning your next steps, considering what adjustment will be made based on the discussions that you've had with your staff. It's important to make sure that you assign clear steps to individuals, making sure you know who's responsible for any next steps. And then also taking a moment at this point to think about what went well with the assessment, what could be done differently, what could be done differently with your conversation. So, you know, always looking for the good, better, and how. And then identifying like when you want to do that assessment next and making sure that it fits in well with your CQI process. All right, thanks for bearing with us. I know we're at 12. I'm going to pass it over really quickly to Nicolette to close us out.
All right, thank you all so much today. I'm going to rapid fire through these slides. Just want to make sure everyone knows where we've been, hopefully where we're going, so you can participate as well. There's also going to be a follow-up email, so you'll see this information again, hopefully. Just wanted to acknowledge that we've already done a part 1 training for what we discussed today. So you can go back to the San Jose Public Library Foundation's website where the Cell Toolkit is. You can find the training workbook, PowerPoint, and recording from that first training. And that's something you can also use with your staff too. So we completed today's training. So that's another mark off. We did an Every Monday Matters training that Mara co-led. So accomplished a lot of training so far this year, but there's still more opportunities to engage. So as I understand it right now, these are the dates for trainings coming up and opportunities to engage through the COP. So the next one will be a virtual reading trauma on March 27th. I'll let you read through the other ones coming, but I did want to acknowledge that we're hoping to do another cell ad hoc meeting. There's still discussion on what that's going to look like exactly. It might be a focus group. It might be a more formal meeting. Stay tuned on more information there. So sorry, that was very quick, but I want to make sure we can get to our next slide where we are asking for your feedback today. I've dropped a link to a feedback survey. I'll drop it again here now. If you have time, we'd love for you to just let us know how we did today. So you can take a picture of that QR code there and do it on your phone. You can use the link that I dropped in the chat. Again, this is going to come out in an email. So you'll have it there as well, but would love to hear back so we know how we can do better and just continue on the learning journey, because we just discussed with you guys how we can support in your learning, and we want to grow in learning too. So all that being said, we can go our final slide where we just want to say thank you again. It's been great to hear how people are thinking about using these tools in their own program. We really appreciate the engagement, laughing alongside us through our tech fumblings when it comes to like me not knowing how to like hide things in Mural and all these other little things. So thank you so much for your attention, and hopefully you got something out of it today. But have a great rest of the day. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you. Have a
you.
good day. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.